In our hyper-connected world, we place our trust in strangers every single day. We summon them with the tap of a screen. They arrive in nondescript cars, offering a smile and a safe ride to our destination. It's a transaction of convenience, built on a fragile digital foundation of 5-star ratings and user profiles. We get in, we tune out, and we arrive. It's a modern miracle of logistics. But what happens when that trust is broken? What happens when the person behind the wheel isn't just looking to make a living, but is hunting? When the convenience of the ride becomes a meticulously crafted trap. Tonight, we examine the case of a man who turned his car into a rolling coffin. A man who drove for money, yes, but whose passengers paid a price far greater than the fare. They paid with their lives, vanishing into the night, one ride at a time. This is a story that will make you think twice the next time you step into a stranger's car. The details are disturbing, but the truth is important. If you appreciate these in-depth investigations into the darker side of human nature, please support our work by subscribing to the channel and enabling notifications. You won't want to miss what we uncover next. Now buckle up. We're about to take a ride with the man the press would come to call the Compass Killer, and explore the roads that led to his reign of terror. Arthur Penright believed the world was full of noise, not just the audible chaos of traffic, sirens, and shouting, but a deeper, more offensive static, the noise of pointless conversations, of vapid aspirations, of people taking up space without purpose. At 54, Arthur had become a connoisseur of silence. His life was a testament to its pursuit. His small, immaculately kept bungalow was a temple of quiet order. His interactions were brief and transactional. And his car, a late-model navy blue sedan, was his sanctuary. The car was more than just a tool for his job as a driver for the popular rideshare app, Compass. It was an extension of himself. The interior was pristine, smelling faintly of leather cleaner and a clinical, unscented air freshener. There were no personal effects, no stray coins in the cup holders, no dust in the vents. It was a sterile, anonymous space, perfectly designed to put his passengers at ease while offering no clues to the man behind the wheel. Arthur knew that anonymity was the cornerstone of trust in his line of work. People didn't want a driver with a complicated backstory. They wanted a silent, efficient servant to convey them from point A to point B. And Arthur was, by all appearances, the perfect servant. He drove mostly at night. The city transformed after dark, its daytime chaos giving way to a more intimate, vulnerable energy. The passengers were different, too. The frantic rush of the workday commuter was replaced by the hopeful buzz of the bar hopper, the weary sigh of the late shift worker, and the lonely pilgrimage of the night owl. Arthur saw the city's true face in the glow of the dashboard, a sprawling grid of lonely souls moving through the darkness. He was their ferryman. His first passenger of the evening was a young woman, a university student named Chloe, reeking of cheap perfume and youthful optimism. She chattered incessantly into her phone, her voice a high, sharp thing that grated on Arthur's nerves. He listened to her one-sided conversation about a party, a boy named Josh, and the unforgivable sin of a friend wearing the same dress. It was noise, pointless, meaningless noise. He gave her a 5-star rating, as he always did. The algorithm demanded it. But in his private, internal ledger, he gave her a 0. She was a waste of oxygen. His second fare was a couple, their hands all over each other in the back seat, their drunken whispers and giggles a violation of the car's sterile silence. They were noise of a different kind, a messy, biological static. He dropped them at a high-rise apartment building, the 5-star rating a lie he typed with a steady, untroubled hand. It was just after 1 a.m. when the ping he was waiting for arrived. The request was from a bar in a trendy, gentrifying neighborhood, with a destination 25 miles away, in a remote, semi-rural suburb. It was the perfect ride. Long, quiet, with a final destination nestled against the dark, unseeing woods. The passenger's name was Kevin. Kevin slid into the back seat, a young man in his late 20s, dressed in a slightly too tight suit, his tie loosened. He smelled of whiskey and ambition. He had the air of a man who had just closed a deal, or at least wanted to project that he had. "How's it going, man?" Kevin asked, his voice a little too loud. "Busy night." "Steady," Arthur replied, his voice a practiced, non-committal baritone. He glanced at Kevin in the rearview mirror. He saw the expensive watch, the confident smirk, the way he held his phone as if it were an extension of his own hand. More noise. The noise of arrogance. "Good. Good," Kevin said, already losing interest, his attention returning to his phone. Arthur pulled away from the curb, his movements smooth and deliberate. He navigated the city streets with an expert's economy of motion. As the downtown lights gave way to the endless, identical houses of the suburbs, the car fell into a comfortable silence. Kevin was engrossed in his phone. Arthur was in his element. He was in control. As they turned off the main highway onto the dark, winding country roads that led to Kevin's supposed destination, Arthur began his process. It was a quiet, internal checklist. He noted the lack of streetlights, the long stretches between houses. He checked his rearview mirror for any following cars. There were none. The world outside the car's windows was a black, featureless void. He reached down and, with a practiced silent movement, pressed a small, unmarked button he had installed himself beneath the dashboard. A soft, almost inaudible click echoed from the back doors. The passenger-controlled locks were now disengaged. They only responded to him. "Almost there," Arthur said, his voice calm, breaking the silence. "Great," Kevin mumbled, not looking up from his phone. Arthur took a left turn, deviating from the GPS route. The car's navigation system, a calm female voice, immediately tried to correct him. "Rerouting," she announced. "In a quarter mile, make a legal U-turn." For the first time, Kevin looked up, a flicker of confusion on his face. "Hey, I think you missed the turn." "Shortcut," Arthur said smoothly. "GPS doesn't know this one. Shaves a few minutes off." It was a plausible lie, and Kevin, a man who likely appreciated efficiency, seemed to accept it. He went back to his phone. Arthur turned onto a narrow, unpaved gravel road. The sound of the tires crunching on the stones was the only sound, a slow, deliberate rhythm counting down the final moments. The road led to a clearing, a small, abandoned turnaround used years ago by logging trucks. Arthur pulled the car to a stop and turned off the engine. The sudden, absolute silence was deafening. "What the hell?" Kevin said, finally alert, the full strangeness of the situation dawning on him. "Where are we? This isn't my street." "We're here," Arthur said, turning in his seat to face the man in the back. The friendly, servile mask of the rideshare driver was gone. His face, illuminated by the faint glow of Kevin's phone, was a blank, emotionless slate. "This isn't here." Kevin's voice rose, a note of panic creeping in. "My house is a mile back that way. What is this? Is this a robbery?" He reached for the door handle. It didn't budge. He tried the other one. Nothing. "What the hell did you do to the doors?" The panic was blooming now, turning his face pale. Arthur watched it, savored it. This was the moment of transition. The moment the noise of their arrogance and their pointless lives was replaced by the pure, honest sound of terror. "The fare," Arthur said, his voice low and even, "is more than you can afford." He didn't wait for a response. He moved with a speed and efficiency that belied his age and unremarkable physique. Before Kevin could process what was happening, Arthur was out of the car and had the back door open. The rest was a grim, practiced procedure, a silent, brutal ballet he had perfected over the last 18 months. It was a process designed to be quick, quiet, and leave no trace. An hour later, Arthur was back on the road, heading towards the city. His car was, as always, immaculate. Kevin's wallet and phone were in a lead-lined box in the trunk, to be disposed of later. Kevin himself was gone, another ghost absorbed by the silent, indifferent woods. Arthur checked his Compass app. He marked the ride with Kevin as complete. He gave him a 5-star rating. Then he switched the app back on, ready for his next passenger. The grid was active. The city was full of noise. And his work was not yet done. Detective Miles Corbin looked at the missing person report and felt the familiar, weary ache settled deep in his bones. It was the fourth one in 18 months. The details were unnervingly similar. A young professional out late, last seen leaving a bar. They had all used a rideshare app, Compass, Lyft, Uber, Itveria to get home. And then they had simply vanished. Their phones went dead. Their bank accounts went untouched. They were erased from the grid. The first victim, a paralegal named Mark, had been dismissed as a man who had simply walked away from his life. The second, a marketing consultant named Jennifer, had sparked more concern, but with no evidence of foul play, the case had stalled. The third, a software engineer, had finally established the pattern. Now, with Kevin Miller, a junior investment banker, the pattern was undeniable. A predator was operating in their city, using the very system designed for convenience and safety as their personal hunting ground. Corbin was a homicide detective of the old school. He trusted his gut, he believed in pavement-pounding police work, and he was deeply suspicious of a world that was increasingly lived through a screen. At 58, he was a dinosaur in a department full of tech-savvy millennials, but he had a closure rate that was the envy of them all. He saw the patterns in human behavior, not just in data sets. The problem, he said to his partner, Detective Lena Petrova, as they stood before a whiteboard covered with the faces of the missing, is that we're looking for a ghost. These apps are designed for anonymity. The drivers use burner phones, fake profiles, they can even spoof their GPS. We're chasing a digital shadow. Petrova, 25 years his junior, was his polar opposite. Where Corbin was instinct and experience, she was data and logic. She could navigate the labyrinthine back end of a tech company's database with an ease that baffled him. The ghost has to touch the real world somewhere, Miles, she said, tapping a pen against her chin. The cars are real. The drivers have to be vetted, even if the system is flawed. There's a paper trail, a digital one, somewhere. We just haven't found the right thread to pull. She had spent weeks buried in data provided by the rideshare companies. It was a deluge of information, millions of rides, thousands of drivers, a complex web of routes and ratings. The killer was smart. He seemed to use a different app each time, and the profiles he used were ghosts, registered with stolen identities and then deleted after the abduction. He was a phantom, moving invisibly through the city's digital circulatory system. But what the killer couldn't control was the real world. He couldn't control the weather, the traffic, or the random, unpredictable movements of other people. He couldn't know about the insomniac amateur astronomer who had been in his backyard a mile away from the logging turnaround on the night Kevin Miller disappeared, testing a new lens on his telescope. The astronomer, a retired accountant named Mr. Gable, hadn't thought anything of it at the time. A car turning down the old logging road was unusual, but not unheard of. But when he saw the news report about the missing banker, and saw that he lived just a mile from that road, he made a call. Corbin and Petrova met Mr. Gable at his house. He was a nervous, detail-oriented man, exactly the kind of witness Corbin loved. It was a dark sedan, Gable said, wringing his hands. I couldn't tell the make or model, but it was clean. It caught the moonlight. He paused. There was something else. After it turned onto the road, its headlights went out. But then, a few seconds later, I saw a flicker of light from inside the car. A bluish light. It flickered on and off very briefly. A cell phone? Petrova asked. No, Gable said, shaking his head. It was brighter than that, and sharper, almost like a taser. You know, the little arc of electricity. The detail was small, but it was the first real-world thread they had. A dark sedan. A driver who knew the back roads. And a possible weapon. Their next break came from an unexpected source. The city's sanitation department. A garbage collector on a rural route had found a discarded backpack in a ditch. Inside was a wallet and a phone belonging to the third victim, the software engineer. The items had been wiped clean of prints, but the discovery was significant. The location was over 30 miles from where Kevin Miller had vanished, but it was nestled in another patch of dense, state-owned forest. Petrova began to cross-reference the two locations on a map. They're not random, she said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Both are isolated, wooded areas. Both are easily accessible from main highways, but are themselves remote. And look at this. She highlighted a third area, a state park 50 miles in the other direction. The first victim, Mark, his car was found abandoned in the parking lot here. A geographical profile was beginning to emerge. The killer was using the vast, anonymous woodlands surrounding the city as his personal dumping ground. He was comfortable in these spaces. He knew them. Corbin stared at the map, at the 3 points that marked the killer's hunting grounds. "He's not just a driver," he said, his voice a low growl. "He's a sportsman. This is a game to him. The city is where he finds his prey. The woods are where he keeps his trophies." The ghost was starting to take shape. He was a man who knew the city's grid and the forest's secrets. He was a man who moved between the digital world and the natural one with a terrifying ease. He was methodical, he was patient, and he was hiding in plain sight, behind the friendly, 5-star facade of a rideshare driver. And as another week passed and another young person accepted a ride from a stranger in the night, the ghost was preparing to hunt again. The only question was whether Corbin and Petrova could find him before he claimed another passenger who would never return. The fear in Bridgewater had a name: the Compass Killer. The media, with its penchant for lurid alliteration, had latched onto the Compass app, even though the victims had used a variety of services. The name stuck, and it spread through the city like a virus. Rideshare usage plummeted. People began to look at the anonymous sedans idling on street corners not as a convenience, but as a potential threat. The city was on edge, and the pressure on Detective Miles Corbin and his task force was immense. They had a geographical profile of the killer's disposal sites, but the woods were vast, and the search teams had found nothing more. They had a witness who saw a dark sedan and a flicker of blue light, but thousands of such cars prowled the city every night. They were drowning in data, but starved for actionable intelligence. Every digital lead, every potential suspect profile registered with the rideshare companies, led to a dead end of stolen identity, a burner phone that had been snapped in half and tossed in a dumpster. The killer was a digital phantom, and Corbin felt like he was hunting a ghost with a net full of holes. Arthur Penwright watched the growing panic with a detached, almost academic interest. He saw the news reports, the tearful pleas from the families of the missing, the solemn press conferences held by the police. He felt no remorse, no fear, only a quiet, profound sense of satisfaction. He was, for the first time in his unremarkable life, a man of consequence. He was the architect of the city's fear. The noise of their panic was the only noise he truly enjoyed. He had decided to take a break from his work. A predator knows not to overhunt in one area. He spent his days tending to his small, meticulously organized garden and reading dense historical tomes. He was a man of patience. He could wait. He drove his route during the day now, taking short, safe fares businessmen to the airport, shoppers to the mall. He kept his profile active, his ratings high. He was a model driver, a single, stable data point in a sea of statistical chaos. He was hiding in the last place they would think to look, in plain sight. The break in the case came not from a brilliant piece of detective work or a digital breakthrough, but from a simple human mistake. Not a mistake made by the killer, but by a victim who was never meant to be. Her name was Maya. She was a nurse who had just finished a grueling 16-hour shift at Bridgewater General. It was 4 a.m., that strange, liminal hour when the night has exhausted itself but the day has not yet begun. The hospital was in a rough part of town, and the last bus had long since departed. She was bone-tired, her feet aching, her mind a fog of fatigue. She did what thousands of people did every day. She opened the Compass app and requested a ride. A minute later, a navy blue sedan pulled up. It was clean, quiet, exactly what she needed. She slumped into the back seat, gave the driver her address, and closed her eyes. The driver was a quiet, middle-aged man. He seemed perfectly normal. Arthur had not intended to work that night, but he had been restless. The silence of his house felt different, not peaceful, but empty. The urge, the need to feel the quiet hum of the engine, the sense of control had been too strong to resist. He had switched on the app, just for an hour, just to feel the pulse of the city. And then the ping had come. A nurse, leaving the hospital. A woman who dedicated her life to fixing the broken, to soothing the noisy chaos of the human body. He felt a sudden, visceral dislike for her. She was the enemy of the silence he craved. The ride was a short one, only 4 miles, to a dense apartment complex in a working-class neighborhood. It was not his usual hunting ground. The destination was not isolated. The risk was too high, but the urge was a fever in his blood. He could make it work. There was a small park, a patch of urban wilderness, just behind her apartment complex. It was not the deep woods, but in the pre-dawn darkness, it would be enough. He drove, his mind working, planning a new, abbreviated version of his ritual. He reached for the button to disengage the locks, but as his fingers brushed the underside of the dashboard, his hand twitched. A jolt, a static shock, ran up his arm. It was nothing, a common annoyance in the dry, autumn air. But in that split second, his finger missed the button. He thought he had pressed it. He had not. It was a glitch, a tiny, random system error. Maya, dozing in the back seat, was suddenly jolted awake, not by a sound but by a smell. Faint, but sharp and unmistakable. The smell of bleach. It was a smell she knew intimately, the smell of a sterilized hospital room. But in a car, it was wrong. It was a cleaning agent, yes, but it was also the smell of hiding something. Her fatigue-fogged brain began to clear, replaced by a cold, sharp spike of adrenaline. She sat up, her eyes wide open in the darkness. She looked at the driver in the rearview mirror. His face was calm, but his eyes, when they flickered up to meet hers, held a terrifying emptiness. She looked out the window. They had passed her street. "You missed my turn," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Shortcut," Arthur said, the word automatic, the lie he had used before. But Maya was not a drunken businessman. She was a nurse. Her life was a series of checks and balances, of noticing the small details that could mean the difference between life and death. And every detail of this situation was screaming danger. "Please pull over," she said, her hand reaching for the door handle. "I think I'm going to be sick." It was a gamble, a desperate, instinctive lie. But it was the right one. The one thing Arthur could not tolerate in his pristine sanctuary was mess. The thought of this woman vomiting in his back seat was more abhorrent to him than the thought of taking her life. He slowed the car, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "There's a park just up here," he said, his voice tight. As the car rolled to a stop by the curb, Maya didn't wait. She pulled the handle. To Arthur's profound, heart-stopping shock, the door opened. She scrambled out of the car, not looking back, and ran. She ran with the desperate, lung-searing energy of a prey animal that has just escaped the jaws of a predator. She didn't stop until she was in the brightly lit lobby of her apartment building, her heart hammering, the smell of bleach still burning in her nostrils. Arthur sat in his car, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white. His mind reeled. She had gotten away. It had never happened before. His system, his perfect, flawless system, had failed. The glitch, the lock, he had made a mistake. He drove away, his mind a maelstrom of cold fury. The botched hunt had left him exposed. He knew he had to lay low, to erase the night's work. He went home, and with a grim, methodical fury, he deactivated his compass profile, reformatted the burner phone, and began the process of becoming a ghost once more. The next morning, a shaken but resolute Maya walked into Detective Corbin's office. She told her story, her voice clear and precise, her nurse's training allowing her to recount the details with a chilling objectivity. She told them about the quiet, middle-aged man, the pristine car, the missed turn, and the overwhelming smell of bleach. It was the break Corbin had been waiting for. It wasn't just data. It was a living, breathing witness. "The bleach," he said to Petrova, his voice electric with a new energy. "He's a clean freak. He's scrubbing the evidence out of his car after each kill. That's why we've never found a trace of forensics." But the most important piece of information Maya provided was the most mundane. When I got in, he had the radio on, she said. It was a classical music station, but there was a commercial for a local business. A garden supply store. Penwright's Perennials. I only remember it because my grandfather's name was Penwright. It was a sliver of a lead, a random auditory clue in a case of digital ghosts. Petrova immediately went to work. She ran the name Penwright through every database she had access to: DMV records, tax rolls, and, most importantly, the raw data from the rideshare companies. The name itself yielded hundreds of results. But when she cross-referenced it with registered owners of dark blue sedans, the list shrank. When she narrowed it further to men between the ages of 50 and 60, living alone, the list shrank to a mere handful. And then she found him. A single, almost invisible digital thread. Arthur Penwright. He had a Compass driver profile. It was clean, almost suspiciously so. A perfect 5.0 rating over 2 years and thousands of rides. No complaints. No red flags. He was a ghost hiding in a blizzard of good data. His profile had been deactivated at 4:37 a.m. that morning, just minutes after the encounter with Maya. "I've got him, Miles," Petrova said, her voice a low, triumphant whisper. She spun her monitor around. On the screen was a DMV photo of a bland, bespectacled, utterly forgettable man. It was a face that could belong to anyone, but on the screen next to it was a satellite image of his address. It was a small, neat bungalow in a quiet, working-class neighborhood, and just behind it was a detached garage with a long, private driveway. A perfect, secluded place to spend hours cleaning a car, unseen by prying neighbors. Corbin stared at the face on the screen. It was the face of banal, suburban evil. The ghost finally had a name. The glitch in the system, the tiny, random error of a missed button and a static shock, had led them right to his door. Now, all they had to do was prove what lay hidden behind that forgettable face and inside that pristine, navy blue sedan. The surveillance on Arthur Penwright's bungalow began immediately. It was a delicate operation. They couldn't spook him. If he got wind of their investigation, he could destroy what little evidence might remain. For 2 days, a team of undercover officers watched the small house on Elm Street, documenting the quiet, predictable routine of the man inside. He emerged each morning to retrieve his newspaper. He spent hours in his garden. He took his navy blue sedan to the car wash, a high-end, full-service establishment, twice in 2 days. To his neighbors, he was a quiet, slightly eccentric retiree. To the detectives watching him, his mundane routine was a chilling mask for the monster they knew him to be. Detective Corbin felt a gnawing impatience. He wanted to kick the door in, to confront the man who had haunted his city for 18 months. But he knew they needed more. A witness's story and a deactivated profile were not enough to secure a conviction. They needed physical evidence. They needed to tie Arthur Penwright's car, his sanctuary, to the victims who had vanished inside it. The warrant they obtained was for the car only. It was a strategic move. They would take the car first, a less confrontational act than a full raid on his home, hoping to catch him off guard. The plan was to tow the vehicle from his driveway under the pretense of it being involved in a minor traffic incident, and then transport it to the forensic lab for a full workup. The operation went smoothly. Arthur watched from his porch, his face a mask of mild confusion and annoyance as a tow truck hooked up his beloved sedan. He spoke briefly with the uniformed officer, accepted the paperwork, and went back inside without any unusual display of emotion. He was, as always, unnervingly calm. At the forensic lab, the car was treated not as a vehicle, but as a self-contained crime scene. The team, led by a veteran technician named Dr. Evans, began the painstaking process of taking it apart, piece by piece. On the surface, it was exactly as Maya had described. Immaculate. It was cleaner than a brand new car off the showroom floor. There were no fingerprints, no stray hairs, no fibers. It was a forensic dead end. If this guy wasn't a killer, he'd have a great career cleaning crime scenes. Evans grumbled to Corbin, his frustration evident. But Arthur, for all his meticulousness, had made a mistake. He had focused on the visible surfaces, the places a passenger would see and touch. He had not counted on a team that would remove the seats, peel back the carpeting, and probe the deepest, most inaccessible crevices of the vehicle's chassis. The breakthrough came from under the front passenger seat. A technician, using a high-intensity light, saw a faint, dark stain on the metal floor pan, a spot that had been missed by Arthur's obsessive cleaning. It was hidden beneath the seat rail, a place that could only be accessed if the seat itself was completely removed. A swab was taken and sent for immediate analysis. A few hours later, the results came back. The stain was blood, and the DNA profile was a perfect match for Kevin Miller, the junior investment banker, the last confirmed victim of the Compass killer. "We've got him," Corbin said, the words a quiet exhalation of relief and grim satisfaction. "We've got the son of a bitch." The second warrant was for the house. This time, there would be no subtlety. As dawn broke the next morning, a heavily armed SWAT team smashed through the front door of the bungalow on Elm Street. Arthur Penwright was found sitting in his living room, calmly reading a book. He did not resist. He simply placed his bookmark in the page, closed the book, and stood up, an expression of profound, weary disappointment on his face, as if he had been expecting them. The house, like the car, was a study in sterile order. But as the investigators began to search, they uncovered the secret world of Arthur Penwright. In a locked room in the basement, they found his trophies. Neatly organized in a series of labeled boxes were the personal effects of his victims. A wallet, a set of keys, a single earring, a pair of glasses. Each item was a silent testament to a life he had extinguished. On a workbench against the wall lay his tools, a high-voltage taser, restraints, and a collection of hunting knives, all cleaned and polished to a gleaming shine. The most damning discovery was made on his computer. In a password-protected file, they found Arthur's private ledger. It was a detailed journal, not of the murders themselves, but of his passengers. He had rated each one, not on the 5-star scale of the app, but on his own twisted scale of their noise. Chloe, the university student, had been a cacophony. Kevin Miller was a blaring siren of self-importance. And the names of the missing were all there, each with a final, chilling entry next to their name: silence achieved. The interrogation of Arthur Penwright was a study in quiet, narcissistic psychopathy. He did not confess in a torrent of guilt. He explained his actions with a calm, chilling rationality, as if he were a philosopher detailing his worldview. He saw himself not as a killer, but as a public servant, a janitor of the human race. "The world is choking on noise," he told Corbin, his voice a dry, academic monotone. "People who talk but say nothing. People who exist but contribute nothing. They are a static, a distraction from the beautiful, perfect silence of a well-ordered world. I simply provided an editing service. I removed the unnecessary noise." He showed no remorse, no empathy. His victims were not people to him. They were concepts, data points in his grand theory of social purification. He had used the rideshare apps because they were efficient. They delivered the noise directly to his door, allowing him to conduct his work with minimal effort. The trial was a formality. The evidence was overwhelming: the DNA in the car, the trophies in the basement, the chilling ledger on his computer, and his own unrepentant confession. He was found guilty on multiple counts of kidnapping and first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he was led from the courtroom, he made eye contact with Detective Corbin. There was no hatred in his eyes, no fear, only a look of faint, pitying condescension. "You can lock me in a cell," he mouthed silently, "but you can't stop the noise." Corbin watched him go, the killer's final words a chilling echo in his mind. He had caught the monster, he had closed the case, he had brought a semblance of justice to the families of the victims. But the case had left its mark. The city of Bridgewater would never feel quite the same. The simple act of trusting a stranger, of summoning a ride in the night, would forever be tinged with a shadow of fear. Weeks later, Corbin stood on his own porch, looking out at the quiet suburban street. A car he didn't recognize slowed and pulled up in front of his neighbor's house. The young woman who got out of the back seat paused before closing the door, her eyes lingering on the driver for a moment longer than necessary. It was a new, reflexive gesture of caution that Corbin was seeing all over the city. Arthur Penwright was gone, locked away in a concrete box where he would finally have the silence he so murderously craved. But his ghost still haunted the grid. He had driven for money, but his true currency had been fear. And in the end, he had left the entire city with a debt of mistrust that would be impossible to repay. The road ahead was clear, but the journey would never feel quite as safe again.